Haggadah now brings us into the story of leaving Egypt. Avadim hayinu leFaro b'Mitzrayim. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. Already at the beginning, I think anyone reading that should wonder. I mean, we were slaves in Egypt, or we were slaves to Egypt. Why is the Haggadah making this so personal? It's about being slaves to Pharaoh. That's first question. Second question is, it's important to the Haggadah to tell us also how God took us out. He took us out with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. I mean, why do we need these two images? And they actually keep repeating themselves throughout the Haggadah. What is there? And finally, we're told that if God had not taken us out, we would still be there, us, our children, our children's children, which is kind of hard to believe. So what I'd like to do is tie these three things together by understanding something which is really very profound about this story which is being told. We're actually not just telling a historical story. We're intending this story to be the awakening of us to our freedom. Think about this. Being enslaved to Pharaoh, I mean, we've actually been brought by the Haggadah to a point where we've been cleansed, we've been opened, we've been able to transform suffering into growth and yearning. We've been invited into seeing how the fragments of our lives are part of a greater whole and to be responsive to that and interactive with those. We've been told about how the Matzah is really humility, simplicity, a connection with being in a way in which we're able to hear things and respond to them as they are real. And then we were invited into the recognition that it's being able to identify difference and distinction which makes it possible for us to have meaningful lives within our freedom. Now, when you recognize that as having what you've been introduced to, so it's very clear why it's important to the Haggadah to tell you that we were enslaved to Pharaoh. Because Pharaoh is actually the opposite of all those things. Pharaoh is someone who's trying to flatten out reality as being completely under his rule. Pharaoh is someone who is bloated with ego and with his kind of just haughty way of being. And finally, I think most strikingly, Pharaoh is exactly the opposite of lechem oni. He's the opposite of bread that is responsive, that's listening to the story as it unfolds. He's not any of these things. He's actually the archetype of the opposite. And so what we're being faced with now is that we were enslaved to Pharaoh. But I think that already points us inward to wondering, how much of Pharaoh is in me? How much do I remain enslaved to Pharaoh? Because the truth is, Pharaoh, even when he dies, there's another one there to take his place in the story of the Exodus. He's like this being, this archetypical presence, which is something which we're always contending with once you see that it's actually a typology. Okay, so now once you connect to that, it becomes very clear that in order to be released from that way of life, of cutting yourself off, of not listening, of not being responsive, of being completely ensconced with your agenda, your ego, and your plan. So then we need then something which is more than just force to release you from that. Because let's say God had actually overpowered the Egyptians with his strong hand, but hadn't also invited us to discover ourselves and to move towards him and the nature of his divine being and the realization of how much of that divine reality is actually part of us, such that we're really attracted to it because we're connected to it. Okay, so you see, the strong hand would have a strong God taking us out, but then we would become real worshipers of strength and power. But if what's taking us out is also an outstretched arm, which is saying to us, I seek closeness to you because I love you, because I care about you. I'm inviting you because I see the value in who you are. I'm drawing you close to me because you're actually quite similar to me. I am the God who releases. I am the God who brings out. I am the God who is, in the very essence, a free being. So join me in that freedom. Well, that's a very different kind of an invitation and learning about the nature of yourself. The truth is, in the beginning of the Ten Commandments, when God meets us at Sinai to actually create the covenant between us and him, he introduces himself not as I am Hashem who created the world, but I am Hashem who liberates, who released you from Egypt. I am Hashem who needs you free, who needs you alive, who needs you awake to the expanses of possibilities so that we can be similar enough to be truly in a covenant and truly in a relationship of love. Oh, that's a very different kind of an invitation than the one which is from an overpowering force that has released the oppressor. That's a God who's drawing you forth with an outstretched arm. I think once you see that he's drawing you away from being Pharaoh-dick. He's drawing you away from being like a Pharaoh who's closed in, but rather now as a creative partner in this creation. So then it becomes very clear also why it is that if God hadn't taken us out of Egypt, we indeed would still be there. Not because geopolitics would never have conspired to get us out of there and the Egyptian kingdom collapse, but because the very nature of the freedom we are moving towards is a divine freedom. And if the one who would release us would be any less than absolutely free, then we would simply become either those who adore their power and the nature of who they are, and we would never learn about the value of who we are, desired by the Infinite One to become free. That's an invitation which can only come from God. Because if any kind of political circumstance had released us, so then, it's just a matter of gaming the game and playing the powers. But if it's Hashem himself, the one who is the infinite, who is reaching down with an outstretched arm to draw us close to him, well, that's a release from Egypt, which is a transformation of us into truly being in the image of God. And so this section opens the telling of the story with a very particular orientation, which once we identify with it, once we contemplate it, once we connect to those forces and powers that are within us, driving us towards our freedom, only then can we truly begin the path towards leaving Egypt. Sit comfortably. Send a message of calm to your shoulders. Send a message of relaxation to your thighs and legs. Take a nice, slow breath in. Now release, slowly breathing out as your body softens. Bring to mind rigidity, a place in you that resists change, a pattern that is unwanted but seems to harden whenever it's challenged. Just feel it without judgment. This is Pharaoh within. Notice how this rigidity feels in the body. Is it a tightness in the chest, in the jaw, in the belly? Slavery is like a contraction. Feel its rigidness. Stay present to it, observing. Now imagine a subtle softening. It's like a willingness to open to another way. Just a small internal movement in a direction you desire rather than where you are stuck. Feel the difference between rigid and responsive. This is the beginning of your freedom from Pharaoh. Move your face slightly upwards. Send a message of relaxation through your body. Open up the space between your eyebrows. Feel an expansiveness opening. Direct yourself towards the Ein Sof, the infinite, the unbounded one, the spacious realm. Sense its presence as alive, not controlling, never threatened, just a boundless freedom. Allow your consciousness to expand into that expanse. Know that this boundless freedom, this is the source of your being. Join it in its vastness. Say within yourself, if the infinite freed me, then freedom lives within me. He freed me from within, not only from without. Connect to that possibility. Connect to that power. Where in your life might this come to expression? Or might you soften instead of hardening? Sense how profoundly freedom is the capacity to choose how you be. Sense the dignity of that. Sense your ability to respond, change. Sense this power to enter a true relationship with openness, availability, with flexibility. Now take one deep breath. Whisper inwardly, Avadim hayinu. We were enslaved. Vayotzienu Hashem. God, the Infinite One, is taking me out. Frees me. Open your eyes gently and carry with you this divine capacity to shift.